Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue will feature a melting pot of topics, ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It's the week of June 20th, Father's Day Sunday. It's been a couple weeks since our last episode, and we have a lot to catch up on. Hi, Ann. How are you?
Hi, Haley. Yes, it's Sunday, June 20th. And Haley, it's the final 2 days of spring, right? Or is summer begin on the 22nd or 21st? Somewhere in there.
I think it's the 22nd or the 23rd, maybe.
Yeah,
But yeah, we
okay.
are getting close to officially the summer equinox.
Exactly. The summer solstice.
Oh, the summer solstice.
Solstice, yes. I think you're right in the equinox. Hard to believe because temperatures around the country have been quite high, and it feels like summer everywhere. And somehow, some way, summer just catches up on me, and it shouldn't. I work in a school where our last episode, we talked about graduation and the significance of graduation. And I think in that almost month's time, so much has happened, and it's so good to see you and, share the flame and our spiritual stew again. So it's good to be back.
Yeah.
But knowing today's theme, we're both going to honor some fathers in our lives. Tell me a little bit about what you have planned, the DeMaria family has planned for today.
Yep. So we are doing all of Jamie's favorite things. We went to Father's Day brunch, which was really nice. We haven't been able to do the typical brunches for Easter or Mother's Day or, all those fun things that we did with the kids growing up. So we are glad to be able to return to that. We spent some time at the pool. My husband loves the pool, which of course I love too. It was fun to watch he and our older son, James, play basketball in the pool.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
That is fun.
Yeah. There were a lot of dads there with their little kids. And then my, big 19-year-old man-child was mauling his father playing basketball. And that was great. We were doing some gardening, some cooking, some binge watching of TV. So again, kind of all of Jamie's favorites. But, it's Father's Day. And, the most important thing is I'm fortunate to be able to talk to, some of these special dads in my life, certainly my husband, but also my own dad. And I know that is a gift that I don't take for granted. I have a friend of mine whose father passed away a couple months ago, and she's traveling with her sister today to upstate New York to spread his ashes at their childhood home. And, I have some other friends who have lost their fathers over the past year, and for them today is a tough day. As Catholics, we have such a veneration for Mary, but as we mentioned in our episode a couple weeks ago, fathers are the silent force of the family. Our family is grounded in the love that our fathers have, just as St. Joseph did, and they are really essential to our family unit. So it's, any day that I can call and talk to my dad is Father's Day. And, of course, I look forward to seeing him and giving him a hug and, certainly know that I am who I am because of the love he's given me over the past 40 some odd years of my life. But I'm grateful to be able to spend the day, with the dad that I live with. So Jamie's Italian. He's a big personality. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, shows that love freely. I think St. Joseph would be proud of the love and the family unit that he's created. So what about you? Will you get to see your dad today?
Yeah, I get to see my dad. I was down in San Diego visiting a close friend of mine, who is very devoted actually to St. Joseph. And we talked quite a bit about that, the role of St. Joseph in his life and some of the ways that St. Joseph is known, just by these hidden acts and small acts of kindness and helping others. And the U.S. Open for men was at Torrey Pines, which is just an incredibly beautiful setting right along the Pacific Ocean. And, I live near the water, but Southern California, the relationship to the beaches, it's just spectacular. So one example, yesterday we were able to go on a run. I did a walk with the Notre Dame Club of San Diego. We met in Solano Beach, Fletcher's Cove. And then we had breakfast, and I thought, this is just the best way to start a day with friends, exercising, and then going to have a meal. So that was really special. But I wanted to fly back for Father's Day to to be with my dad. We'll have dinner. And before that, my dad and I will watch the US Open on television. And I ran into a friend in the airport and he said, "You didn't want to stay for the final round?" And I said, "No, I wanted to be with my dad." And the other thing about golf is that it's so fun to be at the event because you get the spirit of it and there are crowds again and you hear the clapping and the sound of a birdie or a bogey, a cheer or a groan. But it's fun to watch with my dad. My dad is just, so I'm, as a sports fan, I just love smart sports fans. By that, I mean people who really are knowledgeable. And he's not knowledgeable because he's a golfer. He's more knowledgeable because he reads so much. So he'll tell me stats or information and I'm just a hound I just soak it all up. So it's a fun way to, enjoy the day. And they really make a point of noting fathers for the final day of the US Open. So many players, both male and female, come to golf through their dads. And like, for example, Justin Thomas, his dad is his caddy. And so they play up that special relationship. So I agree with you. Fathers they're really special. They're really important. And it'll be really nice to have a meal together after that.
Well, and not easy to leave Torrey Pines. So I will tell you, Torrey Pines State Beach is probably one of our favorite beaches in the world. I grew up going to, my uncle has a condo right there in Del Mar, right up the road from Torrey Pines State Beach. We used to walk down to it. When the kids were younger, we would bring them out there every summer. Torrey Pines State Beach is a special place in our heart.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I know. I wish I'd known that. I would have said a prayer for your family there. So now next time I go, and I saw the racetrack, I was kind of curious about that. That's not a sport that horse racing, but I know that that's
a huge part of life in Del Mar. Oh yeah. We've been to the Del Mar races. We've been to Del Mar Fair. Oh yeah. Okay. There is
the fair.
Yeah. Del Mar is a big part of our lives growing up for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
cute
fun.
Downtown. Yeah. I look forward to going back and, I hope other community schools have this experience, but, staying with Court, he had another friend in from Notre Dame, and then we're at the golf course and we just keep running into people from Notre Dame. It's incredible. It's a really special part of just, being at an event again, which, I don't think we will take, I hope we don't, I know we won't take for granted in the next year and two, but I don't want to lose sight of that. It was great to be, together again. And we went to the Padres game on Friday night and man, the atmosphere was electric. It's a downtown ballpark. You should have seen this crowd. It was incredible. And they have an exciting team, but I was just like, wow, this feels so different than a year ago. And I'm ready for it. And, people are in different places with that. And, if you're not comfortable, then you probably shouldn't go to the ballpark, but having been vaccinated for so long and I'm ready. Let's do this. It's summer. So it was a great, great weekend.
That's great. Yeah, I think everyone's ready, and it came at the perfect time. And I think we have made that shift where it's not on us anymore. I think it's on all of us. But if you're choosing to not be vaccinated for whatever reason, and that's certainly everyone's choice, it's nice that everyone can move on and live their lives the way they want to.
Yeah, here. So happy summer, like we said, either June 22nd or 21st.
Well, actually, I looked it up and it's at 11:30 tonight. So
okay.
Yeah, so officially summer will begin it might have been 11:36, but we are in the last day of spring, which seems crazy. We've been out of school for a couple of weeks, and it certainly is warming up. So. One of the reasons we took a hiatus for the past couple of weeks, one, it's the end of the school year. Both Ann and I work at schools, and, that always brings just a different schedule. There's not a lot of routine that happens at the end of the school year. So life threw us some hiccups. But I also recently lost, someone that could be considered a father figure, and spent some time with him before he passed, and then traveled again to return back to South Bend for his services. So we've talked a lot about my coach from Notre Dame, Tim Welsh, over the past several months that we've been doing this podcast, and we'll continue to talk about him as I continue to really reflect on, what he's meant in my life. But he had battled pancreatic cancer for a long time, almost 2 years,
Wow.
which is an extraordinarily long time to live with that disease. It's a really, really brutal cancer. And he fought it really well. So we feel fortunate that we had him for the length of time that we did after his diagnosis. Many people don't get almost 2 years. For many, it's 3 to 6 months. But certainly that's something that has been a hard kind of emotional experience and roller coaster. But blessings have come from it as well. Not for everyone yet, but I think we're all learning and growing, and that's one of the greatest gifts that Tim left us was that roadmap on how to do that. So I'll talk about him a little bit when we get to the spiritual stew, and then the people we love live on with us forever. He certainly will too.
Yeah. And I don't think we can underscore that enough. Like, I truly believe in the communion of saints. So that's a lowercase s saint. And, the idea there is that our relationship with those who have died does not end in death. In fact, and sometimes it's almost magnified because they're with God. And I think you had said, Haley, if Tim's not in heaven, then I have no chance, which I thought was great. Your humility and humor there,
So
because he was
true. Let me
such
tell
a
you,
holy.
nobody's there if he's not there.
So, maybe for our listeners and for myself as your friend, I look forward to the ways of hearing about how he will be in your life in new ways, right? In the same way that Colleen and Megan are part of your life, the two swimmers that died on January 24th, right? In many years ago. So, blessings for Tim and his family, and gratitude for his life and his philosophy, which I love, that we've referenced many times. And I feel like I got to know him as part of his virtual parish.
Yeah.
And what a great coach, what a great legacy that, someone like that got to leave behind. That's really special. One thought I had too, as you were speaking, is I live in San Francisco. Catholic San Francisco is it's a weekly or biweekly publication of the Archdiocese. And I was sad because they discontinued the publication of it. It's going to shift to a magazine format 6 to 8 times a year, much more digital content. And I don't know what they have. Are you Diocese of Baltimore in Annapolis?
But we're the Archdiocese of Baltimore.
Yeah. So I don't know what your communications is, but I just loved this paper. It's so, it's pithy, and it feels so parochial. It feels so like local, even colloquial, like just celebrations that they would point out of like individuals in Catholic schools in different parishes and what they're doing. And then it had articles from Catholic News Service, or, writers like Ron Rollheiser, or this woman I really like, Christina Capici. So it was just a great way for me to keep informed about, again, the local life of the Catholic Church, more of a national profile, and then an international profile. And then one section was upcoming events or services. If there's a speaker, like Tim Shriver is going to speak at USF on his new book, A Pilgrimage. But, one thing I noticed, Haley, is a lot of parishes offer grief support, so bereavement, and it is very noticeable. And I thought that is wonderful. That's something that our churches can offer people. It doesn't have to be, so many people don't have access to personal counseling because of cost or time or availability. So this is really an important service because, they write about the stages of grief, and bereavement is a process, and it knows no boundaries. It's every one of us, right, will face it. So I'm grateful they have it. They actually have it at St. Francis where I teach. They have a group, because kids, I have students every year that lose a parent or a loved one. So thanks be to God for, our churches that offer that.
Well, and it's something that, like many things, but in particular when you're dealing with grief, if you've never experienced it, it's really hard to understand. And so there is comfort in being together, and there's comfort in being with others who understand your loss. And, it's one of the things that I've been really grateful for these past several weeks is, communicating and being with people who understand that Tim was so much more to me than just a coach. And, when I say my college swim coach passed away, for many people, it's, oh, that's sad, or, I'm sorry. But for those people who really understand and knew Tim, or, they know that that's so much greater of a loss than really quote unquote just a coach. And I don't mean to minimize the role of coach, but
Yeah.
for so many of us, Tim was so much more than that. But it was also really comforting to just physically be with other people. And,
Interesting.
that's the grace of, I would imagine, these bereavement groups as well. And it gave me a different perspective on the literally hundreds of thousands of people who have lost loved ones in this country
Yeah.
over the past, 16, 18 months, that they weren't able to gather physically, to comfort and grieve together. And what a whole nother layer of complexity that must have caused for so many who were grieving. So that's where we have to find the blessings of, again, coming out of this pandemic, is being able to physically be together, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
cheering at a baseball game and celebrating that, and being able to celebrate being together, or grieving together. It's just as important and just as critical to have that human connection that we have been missing and really missing out on.
Yeah. And, whether that's a hug or just touching someone on the shoulder. And yeah, I mean, it's part of just the human experience. And, yeah, I had a couple of thoughts when you were saying, like, he's not just my coach, because this one, it makes me think of, like, if whether you're a teacher or a coach or any job that somebody does, I think we have the power to always be more than just whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is. And there is a coach, Vince Tringali. He was kind of a legendary coach at St. Ignatius, but he says, what do you get out of coaching? He says, what you get out of coaching is a relationship sometimes that lasts for a season, one that lasts for a couple of years, one that lasts for a lifetime, that does not even end in death. And I think that that's true. Like, again, as a teacher, you have those kids where you've taught them for a semester, and it's been real, right? And then you have those ones where you've taught, and like the 4 years they're there, it's meaningful. And then there's ones that go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And any role, counselor, anything that people do, I think that, that's really what makes the human experience, right, so meaningful. But also this that's why you grieve, because it's more than just, you said, like, that one season, because it did, it won't end in death. So,
Right.
yeah.
So tell us about the U.S. Women's Open.
Oh yeah. So yeah, one of the reasons I was underground as well so in our 3 to 4 week hiatus, yeah, we had graduation retirements, but the United States Women's Open came to the Olympic Club. It was the 76th Women's Open. It is the Olympic Club is only the second club to have hosted both the men's and the women's championship. And I'm here to say it surpassed everybody's expectations. Women's golf should not be, I mean, it is, they're so impressive, Haley. And I said to my boss, I said, I can't believe how much more athletic and fit and confident they are than I, previously thought. He's like, why would you say that? And I said, because, I mean, I've seen collegiate golfers, but I don't know if part of being a professional is having that confidence. These women were so impressive. And, television, like, really must put on 15 pounds, because sometimes people say, oh, that golfer looks so heavy. And that's true in the men's tour too. They're men that they say look heavy. In person, I'm like, they're just really solid, and they hit the ball. They drive the ball. Unreal. So it was great. It was great to have just that energy around the club. I was co-chair of junior volunteers. Obviously, I work with young people, so that was my job. So I was there Monday to Sunday, because some people might not know this. Prior to the actual championship, you have the 3 days of practice rounds. So you're there, and we in San Francisco did not have the heat wave. It was like 55 degrees every day. So you just like wore, layers of clothing, and It's a different energy you're on, but it's exciting. So it's always wonderful to be able to host something, whether you're having people in your home
Yep.
or you're hosting at your club or wherever, your parish or something, your school. It takes a lot of energy. And I see why people sometimes don't want to do it because it's exhausting, but it's also so rewarding, right?
Oh, it
So,
is. Yes. No, I totally agree with you and appreciate that and reflect on the Mary and Martha story all the time. And that's a great one we can talk about at some point.
yeah.
Um, but for this week in my spiritual stew, there's a reading from Sirach that I've been thinking about a lot over the past several weeks. Father Tom Doyle, who is the priest that led our little virtual parish that Anne and I were a part of for the last year or so, that was so meaningful to me and to us, and I certainly know to my coach Tim Welsh. I loved being able to celebrate Mass with him every week, and Father Tom, I think recognized what a loss Tim's passing was for so many of us. He's very close with many of the men swimmers, and he texted me and another swimmer a reading from Sirach that I've referenced several times over the past week. It was part of the eulogy and the words that I wrote that I shared about Tim when I was out for his service. But there are a couple of quotes that came from it that I just want to share. Sirach, the reading speaks of godly men whose virtues have not been forgotten, and their glory will never be blotted out. And I leaned on this passage because it really gave me comfort in knowing, first of all, Tim was a godly man. If there was ever a person who lived his faith every day in everything he did, his mission statement for Notre Dame swimming ended with the words, with love for one another, which, has such, biblical references as well. And he lived that love every day. So there is no doubt Tim was a godly man. If I had to think of someone who embodied that term, it would be him. Whose virtues have not been forgotten. His glory will never be blotted out. There is comfort in knowing that who he was on earth, that physical presence is gone, but his virtues, his godliness, his glory, what he taught us stays with us forever. That part doesn't go away. And I've had the privilege, and I just did it last week. It was the first time I spoke, and shared my story since Tim passed. I'll do it again this week. Every year, except for last year, for the past 11 years, I've been invited to speak to at the Naval Academy, to their swim camps in the summer. I love it. It's one of my favorite events to do. But one of the stories I always tell is, why I went to Notre Dame, and people ask me all the time, why would you go to Notre Dame? I love the heat. I grew up in Arizona. It was far from home. It was very cold in South Bend. And I always tell them I went because I wanted to swim for Tim. And, I wasn't, as you know, raised Catholic, so that wasn't my draw to Notre Dame. I wasn't raised a Notre Dame fan, so that wasn't my draw to Notre Dame. But I knew as an athlete and as a person who came from a family of athletes, I'm the second youngest of 12 cousins on my mom's side, and all 12 of us played a sport in college. So I was very familiar with, the college athletics by the time I came around to going through that process. And I knew that going to college, the one adult I would spend the most time with during my 4 years, which we all know are very formative years. The high school years are too, but in college, you're away from home. So you're out of sort of the sphere of the influence of your family. And you have professors and you may have a rector. There were other adults that are very meaningful to you. But if you're a college athlete, that college coach is the one adult that you will spend the most time with during those 4 years. And I knew that. And so I knew that I wanted that person, that coach, to be someone I could learn from and certainly could be coached by, but would also be a positive influence on me. And Tim Welsh was that in more ways than I possibly could have known. But I really went there to swim for Tim. And, what I have learned, and I've really thought about this a lot of over the past several weeks is he showed me how to live a meaningful and happy, but more so meaningful life, having gone through sadness and tragedy. I mean, he shepherded us through the women's swim team bus accident. He lived with that every day of his life. It is the only thing I'm grateful for in his passing is that he no longer carries that burden that I know he carried with him for 29 years.
Wow.
But he showed us how to live with that. It doesn't go away. It stays with you. And he showed us how to live with tragedy and how to live a joyful life and a meaningful life and a life filled with love, that love for one another. And that's what we have to do now. He's gone. It's a sadness. It's a tragedy for his wife and his children and his granddaughters. But he gave us the blueprint to carry on and to find meaning in life and to be happy. And those are the virtues that will never be blotted out. Those words just speak to me over and over and over, and I keep going back to them. And you'll hear me talk about Tim forever, because that is what Sirach is telling us, is that those virtues are never, the glory is never blotted out.
Yeah. Haley, there's just so much there. Just thinking of how often we try to run or do away with pain. And, in light of that profound loss, I was thinking recently of a friend who survived the tsunami in Thailand. And part of his testimony of survival was literally the person driving the boat literally went into the wave. It's totally counterintuitive. You would think you would go towards the shore, and ride it in, but you had to go into the wave, and that's what saved his life. That's why Bobby is still alive today. And I think about, that as kind of an image, working with that suffering and that loss in order to live a meaningful life. And then I think part of, the byproduct of a meaningful life is a happy life. I think that's part of it. So I would speak to that. But hearing kind of your personal testimony and just being an athletic director and working with young people today, I mean, your conviction on that, I would just like to hear, for so many coaches today don't stay. Mm-hmm. A lot of college athletes know there's a risk when they go to a place that their coach may leave. I think of football in particular because there's position coaches and you might get attached to a certain position coach, and those men inherently are, looking to move on. But, so many college athletes now transfer too. So, what do you say to the person who says, I want to swim for this person? Now, maybe do you assess okay, Neil Ivy, she's not going anywhere. She's going to stay at Notre Dame for women's basketball because she's an alum and she worked toward it. So that's safe. How would you navigate that question?
College athletics has changed, right? I mean, we, even when Tim retired, we kind of felt like he was one of the last of those very long tenured coaches at Notre Dame. And now we still have them, right? Muffet was there for a long time. Coach Bray's been there, Coach Corrigan, even Deanna Gumpf. I mean, there are a number of them that stay. And perhaps, Notre Dame is unique in that sense, although I do think there are certainly other coaches who have stayed for long tenures. But that is a risk. But I also think people are looking, I think people's motivation for where they're going and the sport they're playing is different than certainly what I was looking for, right? I was never going pro in swimming, right? That doesn't happen except for the very, very, very elite few now. It certainly wasn't happening 30 years ago. And so people's goals are different. And unfortunately, I think both coaches and athletes see that. But I still think the very good coaches, if it's important to them, can make those connections in even a year or two. It's kind of interesting when you follow on social media. Let's say I'm going to use football because you started with that example, right? If there's a defensive coordinator who made a real impact with his defensive players for a couple of years and he gets a head coaching job, those guys are excited for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're gonna and they'll continue, and I'm gonna just use Twitter because that's usually what I follow. They're gonna still continue to tweet out his successes
Yeah.
where he
Mhm.
plays.
Yeah.
That's a testament to that coach, even if he's not still coaching them.
Yeah.
And it's even, it's one of the things I love about, where we are now with Notre Dame swimming is we have a coach who is there, and I think he will be there. But there were a couple of kind of some turbulent years, just even within Notre Dame swimming, where there was a lot of turnover in
Yep.
coaching. Um, and and Tim stepped into that role, and it was actually the interim women's coach the last year of his career, because they needed a coach to take over to help out with that. So and even in that one year, he made such an impact on those women who graduated, I think probably 4 or 5 years ago, and many of them came back for his funeral as well. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be someone's coach for 4 years to have that
Mm.
impact. I think
Yeah.
you just have to genuinely care about them. Um,
Yeah.
but the landscape of sports and collegiate sports is so much different now than it
Yeah.
was 30 years ago.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
still think it might be a little harder, but absolutely the coaches can still have that impact.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. The other part of the passage of scripture, um, being, virtue and a godly man, I just think it's hilarious they use the word blotted out. That's great. I mean, it's just so funny, but it gets to the point. And I wrote about this in my blog. I was in a golf tournament Monday and Tuesday, and earlier in the week. And one of the reasons I entered this tournament is because the first day was at Claremont Country Club, and that was the home course of a friend of mine who, beloved, died in 2018. And I never got to play golf with him there. He was 3-time champion. When he died, after the mass, the celebration of his life was at Claremont. So I went there. They flew the flag at half mast for him.
Mm.
And he suffered so much in his life. I mean, he lost his home in the Oakland fire, and he also had battled cancer for 23 years. He was really unable to eat solid food because in his chemotherapy, they burned his esophagus so much. So really suffered, but his spirit was so vibrant and he was so beloved. This man could, it was hard to understand him speak. But anyways, I played that day, and he and I played golf at his other club. I thought about how Mike would play the course and, what he might have thought of certain shots. And then afterwards I went up and I thanked the GM and the head pro. I just said, hey, I was friends with Mike Donovan. He loves this place. And they said, oh, Mike, that one still hurts. And I said, yeah, and I just said, the space was really special. I went here after the funeral, and we just talked a little bit about him. And then they said, thanks for telling us that, thanks for bringing up Mike. And I don't know if it's more important for us who live afterwards when we lose someone, that the affirmation that they are not forgotten. I think in our lives, we worry that we'll be forgotten, but I think it's just part of the relationship. It's people remember. And I think that's like that inner peace. So what a great passage to pray with this week and hang on to.
It is. And, I hadn't thought of the actual words blotted out. It is kind of a strange term, but boy, it gives you that visual image for sure.
Rorschach, what is it? The Rorschach test,
Yeah,
the
yes,
blot
with the
test. Yeah.
splat, yeah.
Yeah.
But Anne, you're absolutely right. And this is a great takeaway for us for this week as well. People want to be remembered. And I know, from many families that I know who have lost loved ones over the years, they just want to know that their loved ones are remembered. And I think that's a great message for all of us, and a great takeaway for all of us this week is let's remember those who have gone before us. And, we pray for them, during weekly mass. And, but it might be nice to reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm thinking of you, or I'm thinking of, your loved one. I think that would bring great meaning. It's really easy to do. It's really meaningful when it's received. That's a great takeaway for me. I will make sure I do that this week. And I will also, it's Father's Day. I feel like we talked a lot about grief on Father's Day.
Yeah.
It's certainly a day to celebrate, but it's a
Yeah.
hard day for some too. So I will
I,
be praying
I
for all
agree.
fathers.
Yes. Right.
I will be
Hmm.
remembering those who are mourning their fathers. There's dads who have challenging relationships with their kids. There's children who have challenging relationships with their fathers.
Yep.
And there's a lot of men and women, but, men out there who are father figures and love, love, love people as their own. And, that's really what it's all about. It is those relationships. It all comes down, to love and what we are asked to do. So, lots to think about this week. It's so great to be back online.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and we relate to God as Father. I mean, that's in Scripture, and Abba, Father, and I haven't talked about Shitzel in a long time, but it's in Hebrew, and Abba is just a very informal way of it's a loving term, Daddy, and like to think of God the Father that way is really a meaningful. So, however we celebrate. Not all people relate to God as Father, but however we, can celebrate God's goodness for people like Coach Welsh or my friend, people like Mike, and the it's not an end, but that they grace our lives in new ways. Let's continue to pray with that, and that others may really come to believe that. So.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy your dinner with your father, and I will enjoy
Yeah, the granola.
gardening and making granola with Jamie, and looking forward to talking to my dad and giving him a hug too. So, Anne, it's great to talk to you again, and we'll be back soon.
Okay. Thanks, Haley. Have a good week.
You too.
Happy